Okay, wow, balcony chat number 21. Okay, a little while ago it was raining, then it stopped raining, and then it started to rain, the sun came out, then it stopped raining. I'm like, okay, I can't do this. For my personality, so I'm parking myself in my dining room. And I'd like to say to you, I wish you all could be here with me so that when I'm covering this material and all these questions are flying through your head, you could ask them. So I say all that. If when I'm teaching this stuff, a question comes up, write it to me, because I'm telling you something, several others are thinking of the same question, especially this material. Today we're going to continue our journey, or the beginning of our journey on forgiveness, and today we're going to talk about another form of counterfeit forgiveness. Last week we happened to mention stoic numbness, someone looking very calm after disaster, and they learn young not to show their emotions. And we always call these are glacier people. They're like a chill when you've been around them. Like, woo! You always know there's a lot underground there. But before I get into the other four more we're going to cover, I have to share these nuggets. I couldn't keep them to myself. I've never been able to just read the Word of God and pick out myself and not want to share it. First, I was sharing with someone the other day. She's going through just a trial, and she was saying, you know what's amazing to me is when you're going through a trial, it seems like you read verses that you already learned before, but during the trial, the verses are like, wow, did I ever read those before? And she was like reading in Psalm 34, 17, 18, and 19. It talks about how the righteous do have lots of trouble. So loving God does not keep us from trouble. Also, that God is close to the brokenhearted. Those who are crushed in spirit. When your heart is broken, Jesus is right there with you. So she said, but it just seemed to pop off the page. And I said, oh, girl, it's moving day. And she's like, what? What do you mean moving day? Well, the Christian life, as we learn the Word, study, hear it at church, hear it in Bible studies, what we do is when we learn something, we store it. Some of you store in attics. Some people store in basements. For Ken and I, because we live in a condo, we have storage. So you store valuables. It's not junk, it's valuables. Well, then a trial comes along and, got to get up in that attic and bring some of those boxes down because I know there's a treasure up there that I'm going to need. And you open that box like, oh, that's exactly what I needed. So when trials come, you get back into the Word, and all of a sudden it's like moving day. All of a sudden something, I always say, what are we really moving? You're moving the truth from your head to your heart. 18 inches, intellectual assent, heart, wallpapered with truth. Okay, another bonus. Those of us who are reading through the one-year Bible, we're in Esther right now, and everybody knows the famous verse from Esther, for such a time as this. That's why she was the designated, chosen one who saved all the Jews that dwelt in all of Persia, which was huge. It was a massive kingdom, 120 satraps, divisions, provinces, that an evil man had devised a plan that on March 7th of that time that they had the right to slaughter the Jews, almost like a mini Hitler. Well, long story short, this evil man was at home talking to his friends and family about, I've been invited to dine alone with the king and the queen. You know, I'm so privileged. I'm getting these promotions. I'm second from the top. I even was able to use the king's ring to stamp this edict I had sent out. He's bragging, and all of a sudden in Esther 5, verse 13, Haman goes, he's talking about his wealth, his children, his honor by the king, his promotion. And he said, but. You always pay attention when someone says but. That's a conjunction of dysfunction. It's coming. Listen. He said, but all this is worth nothing as long as I have to see that Mordecai, that Jew, just sitting there at the palace gate. Now, how interesting that all that man had, all that was given him, all that he accomplished, all that was his, and everybody else always envies, he had no satisfaction in it. Because he would see Mordecai and it would rob him of his joy, ruin his day. And I know hundreds of people who have so many blessings they cannot see because they're so focused on the Mordecais that are in their life. I mean, not you guys, but maybe you have a friend like that. So you got to pray for them. Got to open their eyes. Because a person that can rob you of your joy is an idol. You have taken God's crown off his head and put it on that person. That person decides whether you're happy or sad. You got anybody that could ruin your day? You're looking at an idol. So, how interesting that his bitterness robbed him of the joy of his blessings. How often in our lives, our bitterness towards someone who's hurt us or disappointed us or betrayed us or slandered us or whatever they did robs us of recognizing, in spite of that, how blessed we are. So now we'll go to another form of counterfeit forgiveness. stoic numbness, looking poised when you're dying on the inside. Another one is minimization. And that means to minimize the offense. Like, I'll see it happen and think, oh, I bet she's devastated, and I'll catch her face and she's like, oh, no problem. I'm like, no problem? Are you kidding me? Minimization is like taking the sword and piercing me, and then your remark is, uh-oh, no problem. I have a Band-Aid for that, like in a big gouged hole. And I have a Band-Aid. In fact, mine has an angel on it. So put that little Band-Aid. You think that's working, girlfriend? No. So people who minimize what happens to them, they think that's being loving and forgiving. To begin with, that's not honest. I'm not calling anybody a liar, but it's not truth. So don't say something didn't hurt you when it hurt you. That's not truth. And Jesus paid a high price for all the relational crimes that have been committed against all of mankind. So when I minimize the impact of what he did. I minimize the blood that was shed for that crime, that harsh phrase. So I want to give you some examples of minimization, and I call it trash apologies. I mean, I've heard these said before, and my head turns. The minute they happen, I'm like, uh-oh. Okay. So an example of a trash apology is when someone says, well, yeah, mistakes were made, rather than I made a mistake. See, they don't personalize it. They don't own it. I love this one. To the degree that you were offended, rather, to the degree that I offended you. See, nobody likes that personal pronoun, that I offended you. It's like people say, if I offended you, I'm sorry. Well, just that you said if, I'm going to have to forgive you for that remark. If, there's no owning of it. You say, will you forgive me? I know I offended you. All right. Another one people do, I'm sorry you're so mad about it. Okay, wait a minute. They're judging you for being hurt by the offense. So now you have to forgive them for two things. Rather than, I know that I'm responsible for what has hurt you and caused this anger. Own it. I did it. I harmed you. I hurt you. You know, it says in 1 John 1:9 that we confess our sins. It means to agree with what I did wrong. Well, when you offend people, you need to agree. What is interesting, whenever anybody tries to talk to a person about offense, they start defending themselves rather than, well, you know, you're just so sensitive. They always say that one. That's a classic. That's trash apology. That's minimization. There's so many people that do it all the time. Now, the next time you hear someone say that, you're like, oh, that's a trash apology. That's not even legit. Like husbands will say, you know, I can tell you're upset. You can? Really? Rocket science? Rather than, sweetheart, I'm sorry I upset you. Because he knows he did. Or she knows she upset him. If I've hurt anybody, I'm sorry. Why did you bring it up unless you are aware that you had hurt someone? So one thing about true forgiveness, which we're going to deal with, is calling it what it is. Don't minimize it, because remember, the price was paid for the offense. You say what it is. Jesus wants us to forgive freely, but you have to forgive freely what? A specific offense. Think about that. Listen to this verse by the one who drank the cup for this sin. But I say to you who hear. See, not everybody was hearing. Like you're like, everybody's in the crowd. Jesus is talking, but not everybody's hearing. It means bend the ear forward. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies. Do good to them which hate you. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them who are despitefully use you. Well, I almost said despicably. But hey, that works for despitefully. Listen what despitefully means. It means treat abusively. Notice what he says? Pray for those who treat you abusively. Doesn't mean you have to hang out and be best friends, but you certainly can pray. And you can pray that God doesn't treat them as they deserve. That's the greatest prayer you can pray. Don't treat them as they deserve. That's what grace is. He didn't treat me as I deserve. The day I was born again, I found, he forgave all my sins. One other aspect of this, keep in mind, don't minimize. Remember, Jesus paid a high price for it. One other thing, John Townsend says something really interesting years ago. Very often, when you have a lot of children in a family, you have one child that's acting out, and you're like, wow, what's wrong with that kid? Often the one that's acting out, the rebellious one, actually is the mirror. And they're just reflecting the craziness in the family. When people say, how could you behave that way? Well, what about the rest of the kids? They're not behaving that way. Well, the rest of the kids are too chicken to act it out. They're too chicken to speak up. I mean, I've watched kids ask stuff and they won't answer because they want to be mean. They don't want to say something bad. Just so-and-so do it. They all freeze. God desires truth on the innermost part, and freedom comes where truth is. In fact, one of the most radical things you can do is dare to tell the truth. All right. Another thing that is counterfeit forgiveness, even though it looks very impressive. It's psychoanalyzing the offender. Oh, please. Okay, a great offense takes place, and everybody's like, what must have happened to him that he would do something that horrible? What could have happened to her that she would do? They merely go into analyzing her rather than go towards the one they offended. Go towards the offended. Stop psychoanalyzing the offender. Very interesting. When my dad died, his older sister came, the one sister that did come to his funeral, she was the older, and I got her alone after the service, and I said to her, I need to ask a really hard question, and I really hope you'll be willing to answer it for me. See, I was still in the psychoanalyzing mode. Like, how could my dad do what he did to 7 kids? And I literally said to her, do you have any knowledge, and it's just between you and I, any knowledge that my dad was ever abused as a kid? Because a lot of times kids that are abused become abusers. Not all of them. When they get healed, they don't repeat the crime. We don't make people pay for our crimes committed against us. Whatever we don't resolve, we reproduce. I get all that. But I asked if she had any knowledge that somebody hurt my dad. And she put her hand on her heart like this. And I thought, oh, I shouldn't have asked that. And all of a sudden she said, oh, Johnny experienced the greatest abuse. And I'm like, I couldn't breathe. I'm standing there and people are moving past me, when all of a sudden she said, John was allowed to grow up believing the whole world revolves around him. That is the greatest abuse of any child. I want you to know that woman could have gone boom, right now, knocked me right down. I remember walking out of the area where I was walking out going, that's all I could think about. The worst thing I'd ever do to either of my children is to allow them to grow up believing the whole world revolves around them. And our whole society is full of children like that. You talk about the claustrophobic kingdom of self. We have taken God's crown and put it on our kids' head. Everything's about them. Everything bows down to them. Everything accommodates them. Maybe not most of you guys, because you walk with the Lord long enough to know that's not wisdom, and you're walking, you use the word no, and it's not a cuss word, limits, bound, you know that stuff. But just be aware that I'm not called to psychoanalyze why that person did it. I need to talk to the person that it was done to, the offended. All right, another it's counterfeit forgiveness, and it's called holding one's breath emotionally. Man, have I seen that. Where this is different from stoic numbness. The stoic numbness person, when they're offended, when someone says something harsh, unreasonable, hateful, slanderous, demeaning, humiliating, okay, it goes in. The emotion doesn't even come up to the surface because it's been held down under an iceberg. It's like a granite-covered volcano. So long, they don't feel it. So when it looks like they're not feeling anything, you're right. Whereas holding your breath emotionally are the people that, they're always told, suck it up, get over it, quit whining about, stop being a prima donna, stop being such a baby, rant, those words, and they're actually made to feel that tears are like failure. And with this family, failure is fatal. So they suck it up, and they go around blinking their eyes really fast because their tears are coming. They keep blinking. It's one of they don't get those little tics where they blink all the time because they're not allowed to ever show tears. I want to know why God put those 2 holes there if he didn't expect people to cry. I mean, even Jesus wept. David, warrior, shepherd of Israel, king of Israel, he cried. Come on. He was connected to his emotions, connected to God. God wired us that way. It's like taking down the wiring. What's sad is in 2 Samuel 13, where Amnon, the firstborn of all David's kids, rapes his sister Tamar. What is amazing, his name means trustworthy, a man that did not live his name. There's a lot of Christian men that do not live their names, unfortunately. And in my group that I've taught and run with for years, we call those bozos. But anyways, Amnon raped Tamar. What's your brother's reaction when Absalom finds out about it? He goes, hey, come back to my house. Come home to my house. Stay there. Don't say anything. Be silent. Well, what's interesting in the silence is it says, and Tamar lived in desolation. Well, I looked at the word desolation, and it means Baal desolator. So Baal means master. So she was mastered by her desolation for the rest of her life. She was defined by her rape the rest of her life. She never got past it. And even though her brother was quiet, he was quiet, she was quiet, but guess what that silence did? Sucked it up, pushed it under, kept it quiet. 2 years later, he kills his own brother. Swallow a lizard, dragon comes forth. Don't deny what happened. It harms you and those around us. And I just found out I'm out of time. Oh, man. Okay, so next week, we will cover one other aspect of counterfeit forgiveness, and we'll begin authentic forgiveness, but we're going to deal with the big question that everybody seems to have is, why can I not forgive myself? We'd have to cover that first. See you next week.